The gunshot that killed Margaret's husband echoed through the canyon 3 months before she discovered she was carrying his child, and now, standing in the dusty street of Salvation Creek, Arizona Territory, in the summer of 1878, she wondered if God was cruel enough to take this baby from her, too. Sarah Margaret Bennett had buried one child already, a daughter born too early 2 years prior, and the memory of that tiny grave haunted her dreams every night. Now, 24 years old and widowed, she stood outside the general store with a hand pressed against her still flat stomach, feeling the familiar wave of nausea that confirmed what the town doctor had told her yesterday. She was approximately 8 weeks along, and the terror that gripped her heart was almost as strong as the fierce love she already felt for this fragile life growing inside her. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dirt road, and Margaret steadied herself against the wooden post of the storefront, her vision swimming. She had come to Salvation Creek 3 weeks ago, fleeing the memories of her ranch in New Mexico, where her husband James had been killed by cattle rustlers. The small Arizona town promised a fresh start, though Margaret knew she could never truly escape the past. She had taken a room at the boarding house run by Mrs. Henderson, a kind widow who asked few questions and offered steady companionship. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A deep voice cut through her dizzying thoughts, and Margaret looked up to see a tall cowboy standing beside her, concern etched across his sun-weathered face. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of the sky just before a storm. He wore dust-covered chaps and a faded blue shirt, and his hand hovered near her elbow, as though ready to catch her if she fell. "I am fine, thank you," Margaret said, though her voice wavered. Another wave of nausea rolled through her, and she closed her eyes, breathing deeply through her nose. "You do not look fine," the cowboy said gently. "When did you last eat something?" Margaret tried to remember. She had managed some dry toast this morning, before the sickness drove her back to bed. "This morning, I believe." "That was probably 8 hours ago," the cowboy said, glancing at the position of the sun. "Come on, let me buy you some lunch at the cafe. You look like you're about to collapse, and I cannot in good conscience leave a lady standing in the street looking so pale." Margaret wanted to refuse, but another dizzy spell made her reconsider. "I do not wish to impose on your kindness, sir." "No imposition at all," he said, offering his arm. "Name is Cole Henderson. My mother runs the boarding house, so if you were staying there, we are practically neighbors already." Margaret accepted his arm gratefully, surprised by how steady his presence made her feel. "Margaret Bennett. And yes, your mother has been very kind to me." Cole guided her across the dusty street to the small cafe that served the town's residents and passing travelers. The interior was blessedly cooler than the street, and he settled her at a corner table before signaling to the owner, an older Mexican woman named Rosa, who had run the establishment for 20 years. "Rosa, can you bring us some of that chicken soup you make? And maybe some bread, not too heavy," Cole said, then glanced at Margaret. "Is soup all right with you, Mrs. Bennett?" The fact that he had noticed her wedding ring and used her proper title made Margaret warm to him even more. "Soup would be lovely, thank you." Rosa bustled off, and Cole sat down across from Margaret, removing his hat and setting it on the empty chair beside him. His hair was damp with sweat at the temples, and Margaret realized he must have just come in from working somewhere in the brutal heat. "You work on one of the ranches nearby?" Margaret asked, wanting to fill the silence with something other than her own anxious thoughts. "I have a small spread about 5 miles north of town," Cole said. "Nothing fancy, just enough cattle to make a living, and a few horses I am training. I come into town most days to help my mother with repairs around the boarding house and to pick up supplies." He studied her face with those storm-gray eyes. "You are new to Salvation Creek. What brings you to our little corner of the territory?" Margaret hesitated, unsure how much to share with this stranger who was showing her such unexpected kindness. "I needed a fresh start," she said finally. "My husband passed 3 months ago, and I could not bear to stay in the place where we had lived together." Sympathy flooded Cole's features. "I am truly sorry for your loss. That must have been terribly difficult." "It was," Margaret said softly. "It still is." She paused as Rosa returned with 2 steaming bowls of soup and a basket of fresh bread. The smell made Margaret's stomach clench, but she picked up her spoon and forced herself to take a small sip. To her relief, the broth settled well, and she took another spoonful. "My father died when I was 17. Cole said, breaking off a piece of bread. Fever took him in the winter of '68. It nearly destroyed my mother, but she is a strong woman. She turned our home into a boarding house to make ends meet, and we managed. Grief has a way of reshaping you, but it does not have to break you entirely. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes at his words. Sometimes, I feel broken beyond repair. You are still here, Cole said simply. That means you are stronger than you think. They ate in companionable silence for a while, and Margaret was surprised to find that she managed to finish most of the soup. The food did help settle her stomach, and the color was returning to her cheeks. She was acutely aware of Cole's presence across the table, the way he seemed so calm and grounded, like a sturdy oak tree in the middle of a storm. Thank you for this, Margaret said as they finished. You did not have to show me such kindness. My mother raised me to help people when they need it, Cole said with a slight smile. Besides, I have a feeling you might have actually fainted in the street if I had not intervened, and then I would have felt guilty all day. Margaret laughed despite herself, the sound rusty from disuse. Well, we certainly could not have that on your conscience. Cole paid Rosa for their meal, waving off Margaret's protests, and then walked her back to the boarding house. The afternoon heat was still oppressive, but Margaret felt steadier now with food in her stomach. When they reached the front porch of the large two-story house, Cole tipped his hat to her. You rest up now, Mrs. Bennett, and if you need anything at all, you let my mother or me know. We look after folks in this town. Margaret watched him walk away toward the stable where he had apparently left his horse, and she felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. It was not attraction, not exactly, but rather a sense of safety she had not felt since James died. Cole Henderson seemed like the kind of man who kept his promises, and in this uncertain world, that was a rare and precious thing. Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret saw Cole regularly around town and at the boarding house. He was always respectful, always kind, and he never pried into her business, though she suspected his mother had shared some of her story with him. Margaret's morning sickness grew worse, and there were days when she could barely leave her room. Mrs. Henderson proved to be a godsend, bringing her dry toast and ginger tea, sitting with her during the worst spells, and never once making her feel like a burden. It was during one of these difficult mornings that Margaret finally confided in the older woman about her pregnancy. They were sitting in Margaret's small room, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains, and Margaret had just finished being sick in the basin. I am with child, Margaret whispered, her hands trembling as she accepted the cool cloth Mrs. Henderson offered. About 10 weeks now, Mrs. Henderson's face softened with understanding. I wondered if that might be the case. How are you feeling about it, dear? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Terrified. I lost a baby 2 years ago. She was born at 6 months, too small, too early. She only lived for an hour. The words came out in a rush, the grief as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. I held her while she died, and I buried her in the cemetery next to where my own mother is buried. And now I am carrying another child, and I am so afraid that I will lose this one too. I do not think I could survive that kind of loss again. Mrs. Henderson gathered Margaret into her arms, letting her cry against her shoulder. Oh, my dear girl, I am so very sorry you went through that. No mother should have to bury her child. I am terrified every single day, Margaret sobbed. What if something goes wrong again? What if my body cannot carry a baby to term? And I am alone now, without James. How am I supposed to do this by myself? You are not alone, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. You have me, and you have this community. We will help you through this, Margaret, every step of the way. Margaret wanted to believe her, but the fear was a constant companion, whispering doubts in her ear every waking moment. She pulled back and wiped at her tears. I have not told anyone else. I am not sure when I should. That is entirely up to you, dear. Some women wait until they are further along, just to be safe. But you should see Doc Williams regularly. Make sure everything is progressing well. Margaret nodded, though the thought of seeing the doctor filled her with anxiety. What if he found something wrong? What if he told her the baby was not developing properly? The what-ifs were endless and exhausting. That evening, Cole came by the boarding house to fix a loose step on the back porch, and Margaret watched him work from the kitchen window while she helped his mother prepare dinner for the boarders. He moved with careful precision, measuring twice before cutting, testing the strength of each board before nailing it down. There was something reassuring about his methodical approach, The way he made sure everything was solid and safe. "My son is a good man, Mrs. Henderson said quietly, following Margaret's gaze. His father taught him well before he passed. Cole has always had a protective streak, always looking after those who need help. He has been very kind to me," Margaret said. "I am grateful for it." "He has been through his own share of heartbreak," Mrs. Henderson continued, rolling out dough for biscuits. "Was engaged to a girl from Tucson about 3 years back. She decided ranch life was not for her and ran off with a banker headed to San Francisco. Nearly broke Cole's heart, but he pulled himself together and focused on building up his ranch. He has not courted anyone seriously since." Margaret absorbed this information, feeling a pang of sympathy for Cole. Heartbreak wore many faces, but the pain was universal. She wondered if he still thought about the girl who had left him, if he carried that loss the way she carried the memories of her daughter and her husband. Dinner that evening was a lively affair, with all 8 boarding house residents gathered around the large dining table. There was a schoolteacher named Miss Emily Frost, a grizzled prospector named Hank, who was passing through, a young married couple named the Johnsons who were saving money to buy their own homestead, an older gentleman named Mr. Patterson, who worked as a clerk at the land office, and a traveling salesman named Mr. Wheeler, who sold everything from patent medicines to kitchen supplies. Cole joined them for dinner, as he often did, and Margaret found herself seated beside him. The conversation flowed around various topics, including the upcoming Harvest Festival, the new railroad expansion that might eventually reach Salvation Creek, and Mr. Wheeler's entertaining stories about his travels throughout the territory. "I heard there was some trouble up north near Prescott," Hank said around a mouthful of chicken. "Apache raids on some of the outlying ranches." Cole frowned. "I had not heard that. When did this happen?" "About a week ago, according to the fellow I talked to at the saloon. Army is sending more troops to patrol the area." Margaret felt a flutter of anxiety. The thought of violence so close by made her instinctively place a hand on her stomach, though she caught herself and lowered it to her lap before anyone noticed. "Well, Salvation Creek is pretty well protected, mister," Patterson said reassuringly. "We have a good relationship with the local Apache bands. Most of the trouble happens when settlers encroach on treaty lands or when hotheads on both sides stir things up. Still, it is wise to be cautious," Cole said. "If you are riding anywhere outside of town, Mrs. Bennett, you should take someone with you." Margaret met his eyes and saw genuine concern there. "I will keep that in mind, though I have no plans to venture far from town at present." After dinner, Margaret helped Mrs. Henderson clear the dishes while the other boarders dispersed to their various evening activities. Cole lingered in the kitchen, drying the plates his mother washed and handing them to Margaret to put away in the cupboards. "You seemed troubled during dinner," Cole said quietly. When Hank mentioned the trouble up north, Margaret hesitated, then decided partial honesty was better than a lie. "I suppose I am still adjusting to being alone and feeling more vulnerable than I used to. When James was alive, I felt protected. Now, every potential danger seems magnified." "That is understandable," Cole said. "But you are not as alone as you might feel. This town looks after its own, and you are part of this community now." "People keep telling me that," Margaret said with a faint smile. "I am beginning to believe it might be true." "It is true," Cole assured her. "And if you ever need anything, any help at all, you come find me. I mean that, Mrs. Bennett." The sincerity in his voice made Margaret's throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you, Cole. That means more to me than you might realize." The weeks passed, and Margaret slowly settled into a routine in Salvation Creek. Her morning sickness began to ease slightly around the 12th week. Though she still had days when nausea kept her in bed until noon, she started helping Mrs. Henderson with the daily running of the boarding house, doing mending and cooking and managing the accounts, which gave her a sense of purpose she desperately needed. The work kept her hands busy, though it did nothing to quiet the constant worry in her mind about the baby. Cole continued to be a steady presence in her life, though always respectful of her status as a widow in mourning. He fixed things around the boarding house, shared meals with the residents, and occasionally invited Margaret to walk with him to the general store or the post office when she needed to run errands. Their friendship grew naturally, built on long conversations about everything and nothing. Cole told her about his ranch, about the horses he was training, and his hopes to expand his herd. Margaret told him about her childhood in Missouri, about how she had met James at a church social and married him when she was 21. She did not tell him about the baby, That secret remained locked inside her, shared only with Mrs. Henderson and Doc Williams, whom she visited every 2 weeks for examinations that left her weak with relief when he pronounced everything was progressing normally. It was mid-September when everything changed. Margaret was nearly 15 weeks along, and her body was beginning to show subtle changes. Her dresses were getting tighter around the waist, and she had taken to wearing a shawl to disguise the slight swell of her belly. She had just returned from a visit to Doc Williams, who had assured her that the baby's heartbeat was strong and steady, when she encountered Cole on the front porch of the boarding house. He was repairing the railing, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and he looked up with a smile when he saw her. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Bennett. You have been out?" "Just visiting the doctor," Margaret said, then immediately regretted the words when she saw concern flash across Cole's face. "Are you unwell? You have seemed better lately, less pale." "I am fine," Margaret assured him quickly. "Just a regular checkup." Cole studied her face for a long moment, and Margaret had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her evasion. "If you say so, but if something is wrong, I hope you know you can tell me, or tell my mother at least." "Your mother knows," Margaret said before she could stop herself. Understanding dawned in Cole's eyes, followed by something that looked like hurt. "I see. Well, whatever it is, I hope you are being taken care of properly." Margaret felt terrible for shutting him out, when he had been nothing but kind to her. On impulse, she said, "Would you like to take a walk with me? I think I need to talk to someone, and you have been a good friend to me." Cole set down his hammer immediately. "Of course. Let me just wash up." They walked together toward the edge of town, where the desert stretched out in shades of gold and red under the afternoon sun. The air was cooler now that September had arrived, the brutal summer heat finally beginning to ease. Margaret led them to a spot where a cluster of cottonwood trees provided shade, and they sat on a fallen log overlooking a dry creek bed that would fill with water when the winter rains came. "I am with child," Margaret said without preamble, the words tumbling out before her courage could fail. "Nearly 4 months along now." Cole's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with understanding. "That explains a lot. The sickness, the doctor visits, the way you have been so careful about everything." "I have not told anyone except your mother and Doc Williams," Margaret continued, her hands twisting in her lap. "I was afraid to speak it aloud, afraid that if I acknowledged it, something terrible would happen." "Why would you think that?" Cole asked gently. Margaret took a shaky breath, and then the whole story came pouring out. She told him about her first pregnancy, about the cramping and bleeding that had started at 6 months, about how Doc Patterson back in New Mexico had done everything he could, but the baby had come too early. She described holding her tiny daughter, watching the life fade from her before she had even really lived, the devastating grief that had consumed her for months afterward. "Her name was Emma," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We buried her in a little white coffin that James made with his own hands. And now I am carrying another baby, and I am so scared that I will lose this one too. I am terrified every single day that I will wake up, and something will be wrong, that I will feel that cramping again, or see blood, or feel the baby stop moving when it starts to move. I do not know if I can survive losing another child. I barely survived losing Emma." Cole reached over and took both of her hands in his grip warm and strong. "Margaret, I am so sorry you went through that. I cannot even imagine that kind of pain." "Every day is a battle against fear," Margaret continued, unable to stop now that she had started. "I am afraid to hope, afraid to let myself love this baby, because what if I lose it too? What if there is something wrong with me, something that prevents me from carrying a child to term? Doc Williams says everything looks fine, but he said that with Emma too, at least until things went wrong." "Has Doc Williams given you any reason to worry this time?" Cole asked. "No," Margaret admitted. "He says the baby is growing well, the heartbeat is strong, there are no signs of distress. But Emma's problems did not start until later. What if the same thing happens again? What if I reach 6 months and everything falls apart?" Cole squeezed her hands gently. "What if it does not? What if this baby is perfectly healthy, and you carry it to full term, and you get to hold your son or daughter in your arms and watch them grow up?" "I want to believe that," Margaret said desperately. "But the fear is so strong, Cole. It consumes me. I lie awake at night imagining all the things that could go wrong, and I do not know how to make it stop." "You do not have to face this alone," Cole said firmly. I know you are grieving your husband, and I am not trying to overstep or presume anything. But I care about you, Margaret. You have become important to me these past months, and I want to help you through this. Let me be there for you. Let me help carry some of this fear, so it does not crush you under its weight." Margaret looked into his storm-gray eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and compassion. Something inside her chest cracked open, a tiny sliver of light penetrating the darkness of her fear. Why would you do that? Why would you take on someone else's burden when you have your own life, your own concerns? Because that is what people do when they care about each other, Cole said simply. Because you deserve support and kindness, especially now. And because I have come to care for you a great deal, Margaret Bennett, more than I probably should given the circumstances. Margaret's breath caught. Cole, I am still in mourning. I am carrying another man's child. I am broken and scared, and I do not have anything to offer anyone right now. I am not asking for anything, Cole said. I am just offering my friendship, my support, whatever you need. We can figure out the rest as we go, if there is a rest to figure out. Right now, all that matters is making sure you and that baby are safe and healthy. Margaret felt something shift inside her, a subtle realignment of her world. She had been so focused on her fear and grief that she had not allowed herself to see what was right in front of her. A good man offering genuine care with no strings attached. I would like that, she whispered. I would like your support very much. Cole smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Good. Then from now on, you do not face any of this alone. When you have a doctor's appointment, I will go with you if you want company. When you are having a difficult day, you come find me or send word and I will be there. When the fear gets too strong, we will face it together. I do not know how to accept help, Margaret admitted. I have spent so long trying to be strong on my own. Being strong does not mean bearing everything alone, Cole said. Real strength is knowing when to let others help carry the load. They sat together under the cottonwood trees until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Margaret talked more than she had in months, sharing memories of Emma, of James, of the life she had lost. Cole listened without judgment, offering quiet understanding and asking thoughtful questions. By the time they walked back to the boarding house, Margaret felt lighter than she had in weeks, as though speaking her fears aloud had robbed them of some of their power. True to his word, Cole became a constant presence in Margaret's life. He accompanied her to her next doctor's appointment, waiting patiently in Doc Williams' front room while the examination took place, his face breaking into a relieved smile when Margaret emerged and told him everything was fine. He brought her ginger candy when her morning sickness flared up, and he made sure she ate regular meals even when the nausea made food unappealing. When Margaret admitted that she had been having trouble sleeping due to anxiety, Cole taught her a breathing technique his father had used during difficult times, counting slowly and evenly until her racing heart calmed. The citizens of Salvation Creek began to notice Cole's attentiveness, and there was quiet speculation about the nature of their relationship. Margaret knew people were talking, knew that some of the church ladies were scandalized by the idea of a pregnant widow being courted by a cowboy, but she found she did not care as much as she might have expected. Cole made her feel safe, and that was worth more than propriety. It was late October, and Margaret was nearly 19 weeks along when the first scare happened. She woke in the middle of the night with sharp cramping in her abdomen, the kind of pain that sent immediate terror shooting through her entire body. She lay frozen in her bed, feeling the cramps intensify, and her mind immediately went to the worst possible conclusion. No, 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 please God. Not again, she whispered into the darkness, her hands clutching her rounded belly. The baby was still too small for her to feel consistent movement, but she had felt occasional flutters over the past week, and now she willed the baby to move, to give her some sign that everything was all right. The cramps continued, and Margaret felt tears streaming down her face. This was how it had started with Emma, the cramping in the middle of the night, the fear that something was terribly wrong. She wanted to get up, to go find Mrs. Henderson, or even Cole, but she was paralyzed by terror, unable to make her body move. She did not know how long she lay there, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, when her bedroom door opened softly. Mrs. Henderson appeared, carrying a lamp, her face creased with concern. "Margaret, dear, I heard you crying. What is wrong?" "Cramping," Margaret gasped out. "It hurts, and I am so scared. This is how it started before, when I lost Emma." Mrs. Henderson set down the lamp and sat on the edge of the bed, placing a gentle hand on Margaret's forehead. "How long have you been having cramps?" "I do not know. A while, maybe half an hour." "Any bleeding?" Margaret had been too afraid to check. She shook her head. "I do not think so." "Let me get Doc Williams," Mrs. Henderson said. "And I am going to wake Cole. He will want to know." Before Margaret could protest, Mrs. Henderson was gone, moving with surprising speed for a woman of her age. Margaret lay in the dark, continuing to count her breaths the way Cole had taught her, trying to keep the panic from overwhelming her completely. The cramps were still there, a dull ache that made her want to curl into a ball, but they seemed to be easing slightly. Cole appeared in her doorway within minutes, his hair disheveled from sleep and his shirt buttoned hastily. He came straight to her bedside and took her hand. "Ma says you are having cramps. What can I do?" "I am so scared," Margaret whispered. "What if I am losing the baby? What if it is happening again?" "We do not know that," Cole said firmly, though she could see the worry in his eyes. "Doc Williams is on his way. He will examine you and tell us what is happening. Until then, we are going to breathe together, just like I taught you. Can you do that with me?" Margaret nodded, and Cole guided her through the breathing exercise, his voice low and steady, his hand warm around hers. Gradually, her racing heart began to slow, and she realized that the cramps were definitely lessening. By the time Doc Williams arrived, bustling into the room with his black medical bag, the pain had subsided to a dull ache. Doc Williams examined her thoroughly while Cole and Mrs. Henderson waited outside. He checked for bleeding, listened to the baby's heartbeat with his stethoscope, and pressed carefully on her abdomen. Finally, he sat back with a reassuring smile. "Everything appears to be fine, Mrs. Bennett. The baby's heartbeat is strong and regular. There is no bleeding, and the cramping you experienced was likely just your uterus stretching as the baby grows. It is quite common, and usually nothing to worry about, though I understand why it frightened you given your history." Margaret burst into tears, partly from relief and partly from the emotional exhaustion of the past hour. "Are you certain? The baby is really all right?" "As certain as I can be," Doc Williams said kindly. "Your body is changing rapidly to accommodate a growing child, and sometimes that causes discomfort. If the cramping returns and is accompanied by bleeding, or if the pain becomes severe, send for me immediately. But based on what I can see tonight, everything is progressing normally." When Doc Williams left, Cole returned to Margaret's room and found her still crying, though now the tears were from relief. He sat on the edge of her bed and pulled her into a gentle embrace, letting her soak his shirt with her tears. "The baby is all right," Margaret said against his chest. "Doc Williams says it was just normal cramping, just my body adjusting." "Thank God," Cole breathed, and Margaret heard the genuine relief in his voice. "You scared me, Margaret." "I scared myself," she admitted. "For those first few minutes, I was convinced I was losing the baby, and I felt like I was dying. I cannot lose another child, Cole. I cannot survive that again." "You are not going to lose this baby," Cole said, with a conviction that made her want to believe him. "This little one is going to be just fine. You are going to carry it to term, and you are going to give birth to a healthy son or daughter, and you are going to watch that child grow up strong and happy." "How can you be so certain?" Margaret asked. "Because I have to be," Cole said simply. "One of us has to hold on to hope, and right now, that is my job. You have been through hell, Margaret, and your fear is completely understandable. So let me carry the hope for both of us until you are ready to hope again yourself." Margaret pulled back enough to look at his face, and what she saw there took her breath away. Cole was looking at her with an intensity that went far beyond friendship, with a depth of feeling that he had been carefully keeping hidden. In that moment, Margaret realized that Cole Henderson had fallen in love with her, truly and deeply in love, and the knowledge both terrified and comforted her. "Cole," she began, unsure what to say. "You do not have to say anything," Cole interrupted gently. "I know this is complicated. I know you are still grieving James. I know you are carrying his child, and I know the timing of everything is far from ideal. But I need you to know that I am here, Margaret. I am not going anywhere. Whatever you need, however long it takes, I am here." Margaret felt her heart crack open a little wider, letting in more of that precious light. She was not ready to love again, not fully, but she could not deny that Cole had become essential to her, that his presence brought her comfort and strength she desperately needed. "Thank you," she whispered. Thank you for being here, for caring, for everything." Cole pressed a kiss to her forehead, chaste and gentle. "Try to get some rest now. I will be right downstairs if you need anything. You just call out, and I will hear you." "Will you stay?" The words were out before Margaret could reconsider them. "Just for a little while? I do not want to be alone right now." Cole nodded and settled into the chair beside her bed, reaching over to hold her hand. "I will stay as long as you need me." Margaret fell asleep with Cole's hand wrapped around hers, and for the first time in months, her dreams were not filled with death and loss, but with the possibility of new beginnings. The incident brought them even closer together. Cole started spending more time at the boarding house, often sleeping in the small room his mother kept for him downstairs, so he would be nearby if Margaret needed anything during the night. The other boarders accepted his increased presence with good-natured teasing, and even the disapproving church ladies seemed to soften when they saw how devoted Cole was to ensuring Margaret's well-being. As November arrived and Margaret entered her 20th week of pregnancy, her belly became unmistakably round, and she felt the baby's movements grow stronger each day. The first time she felt a definite kick, she was sitting on the porch with Cole, mending one of his shirts, and she gasped in surprise. "What is wrong?" Cole asked immediately, alert to any sign of distress. "Nothing is wrong," Margaret said, her face breaking into a smile. "The baby kicked. Here, give me your hand." She placed Cole's large hand on her belly, and they waited in breathless anticipation. After a moment, the baby kicked again, a small but definite thump against Cole's palm. His face lit up with wonder. "That is amazing," he breathed. "That is your baby in there, Margaret, a real little person." "It makes it feel more real," Margaret said, keeping his hand pressed against her belly, feeling the baby move. "It is harder to be quite so afraid when I can feel proof of life." Over the following weeks, Margaret found herself seeking out Cole's presence whenever the baby was particularly active, wanting to share these moments with someone who cared. Cole's face never failed to show delight when he felt the baby kick, and he started talking to Margaret's belly, telling the baby stories about the ranch and the horses, and promising to teach the little one to ride when they were old enough. It was during one of these tender moments in late November that Margaret realized she had fallen in love with Cole Henderson. They were sitting in the boarding house parlor after dinner. The other residents had retired to their rooms, and Cole had his hand on her belly, feeling the baby's acrobatics. The fireplace crackled warmly, and outside the first winter rain pattered against the windows. "You are going to be a wonderful father someday," Margaret said softly. Cole looked up at her, his gray eyes serious. "I would like to be a father to this baby, if you would let me. I know I am not the biological father, but I already love this little one. How could I not? This baby is part of you." Margaret felt her eyes fill with tears, but this time they were not tears of fear or grief. "You would take on another man's child?" "In a heartbeat," Cole said without hesitation. "Margaret, I love you. I am in love with you. I have been for weeks now, maybe even months. I love your strength and your courage and the way you keep fighting even when you are terrified. I love how gentle you are with my mother's cat, and how you hum while you cook, and how you get this little wrinkle between your eyebrows when you concentrate on your mending. I love everything about you, and that includes this baby you are carrying." "I love you too," Margaret whispered, the words feeling both frightening and liberating. "I did not think I could love anyone again after losing James, but you have shown me that the heart has more capacity than I knew. I love you, Cole Henderson, and it scares me because I am afraid of losing more people I love." "You are not going to lose me," Cole promised, cupping her face in his hands. "I am not going anywhere, Margaret. I am going to be right here beside you through everything that comes." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Margaret felt the final walls around her heart crumble. She kissed him back, pouring into it all the love and gratitude and hope she was finally allowing herself to feel. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling, and the baby gave a particularly strong kick as if in approval. "I think the baby likes you," Margaret laughed. "I should hope so, since I plan to be around for a very long time," Cole said, pressing another kiss to her forehead, then to her belly. "You hear that, little one? You are stuck with me." They talked late into the night, making plans for the future. Cole wanted to marry Margaret as soon as possible, but Margaret worried about propriety and what people would say. Cole argued, quite reasonably, that people were already talking, and that they might as well give them something real to talk about. More importantly, he wanted Margaret to have the security and protection of being his wife before the baby came. "I want this baby to have my name," Cole said. "I want people to know that this child has a father who will love and protect them. I do not care that I did not father the baby biologically. This will be my child in every way that matters." "What if people judge you for taking on a pregnant widow?" Margaret asked. "What if they think less of you?" "Then those people are not worth my concern," Cole said firmly. "Anyone who matters will understand. My mother certainly approves," she told me as much weeks ago, when she figured out I had feelings for you. "Doc Williams thinks it is a fine idea. He mentioned it to me just yesterday. The Johnsons at the boarding house said you two make a lovely couple. The only opinions that matter are yours and mine, and maybe this baby's." Margaret placed her hands on her belly. "The baby definitely approves, based on all this kicking." "Then it is settled," Cole said. "Will you marry me, Margaret Bennett? Will you let me be your husband and the father to your child? Will you build a life with me?" "Yes," Margaret said, feeling joy bubble up inside her for the first time since James died. "Yes, I will marry you, Cole Henderson." They married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Salvation Creek. Margaret wore a dress that Mrs. Henderson helped alter to accommodate her growing belly, now prominent at 23 weeks. Cole wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, and his face radiant with happiness. Mrs. Henderson cried throughout the entire ceremony, and most of the town turned out to witness the union, filling the small church to capacity. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Cole kissed her, Margaret felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was not the life she had planned, not the future she had imagined when she married James, but it was good and true and filled with love. She could feel her heart healing, slowly but surely, the cracks being filled with new hope. They moved out to Cole's ranch the day after the wedding, and Margaret fell in love with the place immediately. The house was modest but well built, with a large kitchen, a cozy parlor, 2 bedrooms upstairs, and a wide front porch that looked out over the desert landscape. Cole had spent the weeks before the wedding preparing the house, building furniture for the baby's room, fixing any leaks or drafts, and making sure everything was comfortable and safe. "This room will be the nursery," Cole said, showing her the smaller bedroom upstairs. He had painted the walls a soft yellow and built a beautiful cradle from smooth pine wood. "I thought yellow was safe since we do not know if the baby is a boy or girl." Margaret ran her hand over the cradle, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It is perfect, Cole. Everything is perfect." Life on the ranch was different from life at the boarding house, but Margaret adapted quickly. She learned to cook on the wood stove, helped Cole tend the garden he had planted, and even learned to feed the chickens and collect eggs, though Cole would not let her do any heavy work. He was almost comically protective of her, constantly worried that she was overdoing things or not resting enough. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Margaret told him one afternoon when he insisted she sit down after she had been on her feet for all of 20 minutes. "I know," Cole said sheepishly. "I just want to make sure you and the baby are safe." "We are safe," Margaret assured him, pulling him down to sit beside her on the porch swing. "The baby is growing well. Doc Williams said so at my last appointment. You heard him yourself." They had visited Doc Williams just the day before, and the doctor had pronounced Margaret and the baby in excellent health. She was now 25 weeks along, and the baby was active and growing right on schedule. Doc Williams told them that Margaret's body seemed to be handling this pregnancy much better than her first, though he cautioned them to remain vigilant for any signs of trouble. "I cannot help but worry," Cole admitted. "I know how scared you are, and I am scared too. I could not bear it if something happened to you or the baby." "I am not as scared as I was," Margaret said, realizing it was true. "Do not misunderstand me. I still have moments of fear, especially at night when my mind starts imagining terrible things. But overall, I feel more hopeful than afraid now. This pregnancy has been so different from my first. I feel stronger, healthier, and having you beside me makes all the difference." Cole wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they sat together watching the sun set over the desert. The December air was cool but not cold, and the sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Margaret rested her head on Cole's shoulder and placed her hands on her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. "I have been thinking about names," Margaret said. "If the baby is a boy, I would like to name him Samuel James, after my father and my first husband. Would that be all right with you?" That is a fine name, Cole said. What about if the baby is a girl? I was thinking Emma Grace, after my first daughter, and because Grace is what I feel I have been given through all of this, through meeting you. Cole pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Emma Grace is beautiful, though maybe we should have a middle name option that is not quite so heavy with meaning, in case the little one does not want to carry that weight. Margaret considered this. What about Emma Rose? Roses were my mother's favorite flower. Emma Rose Henderson, Cole said, trying it out. That is perfect. As Christmas approached, Margaret was 28 weeks along and feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Her back ached constantly, her ankles swelled by the end of each day, and she could no longer sleep comfortably in any position. Cole did everything he could to help, rubbing her back, propping her feet up on pillows, even reading aloud to her when she could not sleep at night. Mrs. Henderson came out to the ranch on Christmas Eve, bringing gifts and a feast she had prepared. They spent the evening together, the three of them, eating and laughing and sharing stories. Margaret felt overwhelmed with gratitude for this strange little family they had formed. She had lost so much, but she had also been given so much in return. I have a gift for you, Cole said after his mother had gone home and they were preparing for bed. He handed Margaret a small wooden box, beautifully carved with a pattern of roses. Inside the box was a locket on a delicate gold chain. Margaret opened it to find two tiny photographs, one on each side. On the left was a picture of James, young and smiling, taken not long after they had married. On the right was a picture of Cole, equally young and handsome. I went through your things to find the photograph of James, Cole explained. I hope you do not mind. I thought you might like to carry both of us close to your heart. James was your first love, and his child is growing inside you. That is part of your story, part of who you are, and I do not want you to ever feel like you have to hide that or forget him. He deserves to be remembered. Margaret could barely see through her tears. How did you become so wise and generous? I just love you, Cole said simply. All of you, including your past and your grief and your memories. They made you who you are. Margaret clasped the locket around her neck, feeling the weight of it settle against her chest. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks, wrapped in Cole's arms, carrying both her past and her future close to her heart. January brought cold winds and occasional rain, and Margaret grew larger and more uncomfortable with each passing day. She was 32 weeks along now, entering the window of time when things had gone wrong with Emma. The fear that had receded during the hopeful months of her marriage to Cole came roaring back with a vengeance. She started having anxiety attacks in the middle of the night, waking Cole with her gasping breaths and racing heart. He would hold her and talk her through them, reminding her to breathe, reassuring her that everything was fine. But Margaret could feel the terror building inside her like a storm, and she did not know how to make it stop. I cannot shake the feeling that something terrible is going to happen, she told Doc Williams during her weekly appointment. Every day I wake up, and I'm surprised that the baby is still moving, still alive. Doc Williams examined her thoroughly, and then sat down with both Margaret and Cole in his office. Mrs. Henderson, everything continues to look excellent. The baby is a good size, the heartbeat is strong, there are no signs of any problems. I understand your fear given your history, but I want you to try to trust that this pregnancy is different. Your body is doing exactly what it should be doing. But what if it suddenly stops? Margaret asked desperately. What if I wake up tomorrow and everything has changed? Then we will deal with it, Doc Williams said calmly. But living in constant fear of what might happen is not healthy for you or the baby. Fear causes stress, and stress can actually cause problems. You need to find a way to manage this anxiety. Mrs. Henderson. Cole took Margaret's hand. What can we do to help her feel safer? Some women find it helpful to come in more frequently for checkups, just for reassurance, Doc Williams suggested. I am happy to see you twice a week if that would help, Mrs. Henderson. We can listen to the baby's heartbeat, make sure everything is progressing well. Sometimes hearing that steady heartbeat is enough to quiet the anxiety for a while. Margaret agreed, and they began making the trip into town twice a week for appointments. Each time Doc Williams confirmed that the baby was fine, Margaret would feel a wave of relief, but it never lasted more than a day or two before the fear crept back in. She hated feeling this way, hated that she could not simply enjoy her pregnancy and trust that things would work out. It was mid-January, and Margaret was 34 weeks along when the second major scare happened. She and Cole had gone into town for her appointment and were having lunch at Rose's Cafe before heading back to the ranch. Margaret had just finished her soup when she felt a sudden gush of wetness between her legs. Terror seized her immediately. "Cole!" she gasped, grabbing his arm. "Something is wrong. I think my water just broke." Cole's face went pale, but he kept his voice calm. "Are you sure? Could it be something else?" "I do not know," Margaret said, tears already streaming down her face. "But something is definitely wrong. We need to get to Doc Williams right now." Cole threw money on the table and helped Margaret to her feet. They hurried across the street to Doc Williams's office, Margaret clutching Cole's arm and trying not to panic. If her water had broken at 34 weeks, it meant the baby would come early, possibly too early. Emma had been born at 26 weeks and had not survived. Would a 34-week baby fare any better? Doc Williams examined her immediately, and after what felt like an eternity, he looked up with a reassuring smile. "Your water has not broken, Mrs. Henderson. What you experienced was likely just an increase in vaginal discharge, which is very common in the 3rd trimester. The baby's head is pressing down, which can cause the body to produce more fluid. Everything is fine." Margaret burst into tears, this time from relief. "Are you absolutely certain? The baby is not coming early?" "I am certain," Doc Williams said kindly. "Your cervix is still closed, the baby is not in distress, and there is no sign of labor. You are going to carry this baby for several more weeks at least." Cole held Margaret while she cried, his own relief evident in the way his shoulders sagged. When they finally left Doc Williams' office, Margaret felt emotionally wrung out. "I do not know how much more of this I can take," she admitted to Cole as they drove back to the ranch in the wagon. "Every little thing sends me into a panic. I am exhausted from being afraid all the time." "We are almost there," Cole said gently. 6 more weeks, maybe less, and the baby will be here. You can do this, Margaret. You are the strongest person I know." "I do not feel strong," Margaret said. "I feel like I am barely holding myself together." "You are still holding together, though," Cole pointed out. "That is what matters. You keep going even when you are scared. That is real strength." Margaret leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. She did not know what she would do without Cole. He was her anchor, her safe harbor in the storm of her fear. The weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness. Margaret was 36 weeks, then 37. Each day that passed brought her closer to full term, but also closer to the point when she had lost Emma. The anxiety was a constant companion, making it hard to eat, hard to sleep, hard to think about anything else. Cole did his best to distract her, reading aloud from books, teaching her to play chess, taking her on slow walks around the ranch when the weather permitted. Mrs. Henderson came out several times a week, bringing food and companionship and practical baby items she had been collecting. "You are going to need diapers and blankets and gowns," Mrs. Henderson said, unpacking a basket full of soft white fabric. "I have been sewing in the evenings, keeping my hands busy. I figured you and Cole could use these things." Margaret fingered the delicate stitching on a tiny gown. "These are beautiful. Thank you." "I made some of these for my own babies," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "I lost 2 between Cole and his older sister Sarah, one at birth and one at 3 months old. So I understand something of what you are feeling, dear. The fear never quite goes away, but you learn to live with it." "How did you survive it?" Margaret asked. "Losing children?" "One day at a time," Mrs. Henderson said. "One breath at a time. And I held on to the children I still had, reminded myself that life continues even after loss. You will survive too, Margaret, no matter what happens. Though I believe with all my heart that this baby is going to be just fine." Margaret wanted to believe her, wanted to have that kind of faith, but the fear was too strong. She was 38 weeks now, further along than she had ever gotten before, and instead of feeling relieved, she felt more terrified than ever. What if something went wrong now, when she was so close? "I am scared I will lose this baby too," she told Cole one night as they lay in bed. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on her belly, feeling the baby's movements. "We are so close, Cole, but that means we are also at the most dangerous time. What if the baby comes and something is wrong? What if the cord is wrapped around the neck, or the baby cannot breathe, or there is something wrong that we cannot see?" Cole pulled her close, his hand covering hers on her belly. "Then we will face it together," he said quietly. "But Margaret, You need to hear this. You are not that same person you were 2 years ago. You are stronger now, healthier. This pregnancy has been completely different from your first. The baby is a good size. Doc Williams says everything looks perfect. You have to start trusting that maybe, just maybe, everything is going to be all right. But what if it is not? Margaret whispered. What if I let myself hope and then everything falls apart? Then at least you will have had these weeks of hope instead of spending them in fear, Cole said. Margaret, I know you are scared. I am scared too. But we cannot let fear steal the joy of these last days before we meet our baby. Let yourself feel excited. Let yourself imagine holding our son or daughter in your arms. Let yourself believe that good things can happen. Margaret pressed her face against Cole's chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him, drawing strength from his certainty. I will try, she promised. I will try to hope. The next morning, Margaret woke with a new resolve. She was 38.5 weeks along, and the baby could come any day now. Instead of spending these precious last days in terror, she would try to embrace them. She let herself set up the nursery, folding the little gowns Mrs. Henderson had made and placing them in the dresser Cole had built. She washed the blankets and hung them to dry in the sunshine. She even let herself imagine holding the baby, nursing it, watching it grow. Cole noticed the change in her immediately. You seem different today, he said over breakfast. Calmer somehow. I am trying to take your advice, Margaret said. I am trying to hope instead of just fear. I do not know if I can maintain it, but I want to try. I am proud of you, Cole said, reaching across the table to take her hand. That takes real courage. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Margaret felt the first contraction. It was not painful, just a tightening sensation across her belly that lasted about 30 seconds and then faded. She did not mention it to Cole, not wanting to alarm him if it was nothing, but over the next hour she felt 2 more contractions, spaced about 20 minutes apart. Cole, she said carefully, I think I might be in labor. Cole shot to his feet immediately. Are you sure? What are you feeling? Contractions, I think. They are not painful yet, just tightening, but they have been regular for the past hour. Margaret tried to stay calm, but her heart was already racing. This was it. After months of waiting and worrying, the baby was finally coming. We should get you to town, Cole said, already moving toward the barn to hitch up the wagon. Doc Williams said to come to his office as soon as labor started. The contractions are still far apart, Margaret said, though she followed him. We probably have time. But, as if to contradict her, another contraction came, this one stronger and definitely painful. Margaret gasped and doubled over, gripping the porch railing. Cole was at her side in an instant. That did not look like nothing. Come on, we are going now. He helped her into the wagon and drove toward town at a speed that probably was not safe, but Margaret did not protest. The contractions were coming faster now, every 10 minutes or so, and each one was stronger than the last. By the time they reached town, Margaret was breathing hard through the pain, her hands clutching Cole's arm. Doc Williams took one look at her and ushered them into his back room, where he kept a bed for patients who needed to stay overnight. Let me examine you and see how far along you are, he said calmly. The examination confirmed that Margaret was in active labor, already dilated to 5 centimeters. This baby is coming tonight, Doc Williams said. The labor is progressing quickly, which is actually a good sign. It means your body knows what to do. Margaret felt terror rise up, threatening to overwhelm her. What if something goes wrong? What if the baby cannot breathe, or there is a problem with the cord, or... Margaret, look at me, Doc Williams said firmly, taking her hand. You are doing beautifully. The baby's heartbeat is strong. Everything looks exactly as it should. I know you were scared, but I need you to trust me and trust your body. You can do this. Cole positioned himself beside her, letting her squeeze his hand through each contraction. I am right here, he murmured. You are not alone, Margaret. I am with you through every moment of this. The labor was long and intense, lasting through the night and into the early morning hours. Margaret had never experienced pain like this, waves of it that crested and broke over her, leaving her gasping and trembling. But Cole never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, encouraging her when she felt like she could not go on. I am so scared, Margaret sobbed during a brief respite between contractions. What if the baby comes out and is not breathing? What if something is wrong? Then Doc Williams will fix it, Cole said firmly. But our baby is going to be fine, Margaret. I know it in my bones. This little one is a fighter, just like you. As dawn broke outside the window, Margaret felt an overwhelming urge to push. Doc Williams checked her and nodded. It is time. On the next contraction, I want you to push as hard as you can. The final stage of labor was both the most painful and the shortest. Margaret pushed with everything she had, tears streaming down her face. Cole's hand gripped so tightly in hers that she was probably hurting him. She heard Doc Williams giving instructions, felt the burning pressure as the baby crowned, and then with one final desperate push, felt the baby slip free. For a terrible moment, there was silence. Margaret held her breath, terror freezing her heart. And then the baby cried, a lusty wail that filled the room, and Margaret burst into sobs of relief so powerful they shook her entire body. You have a son, Doc Williams announced, placing the squalling infant on Margaret's chest. A big, healthy boy with an excellent set of lungs. Margaret looked down at her son through tears of joy and could hardly believe he was real. He was red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. She touched his cheek, his hand, counted his fingers and toes, and felt love so fierce it almost hurt. Samuel, she whispered. Samuel James Henderson. Cole was crying too, tears running unashamedly down his face as he looked at the baby. He is perfect, Margaret. Absolutely perfect. Doc Williams finished delivering the afterbirth and cleaning up while Margaret held her son, marveling at every tiny detail. Samuel was nursing hungrily, his little mouth working determinedly, and Margaret felt a sense of completeness she had not known since Emma died. He is healthy? Margaret asked Doc Williams for the 10th time. Everything is normal? Everything is perfect, Doc Williams assured her. He is a good size, probably close to 8 pounds. His breathing is strong, his color is good, all his parts are where they should be. You have a perfectly healthy baby boy, Mrs. Henderson. Margaret finally let herself believe it. She had done it. She had carried a baby to term and given birth to a living, breathing child. The fear that had haunted her for 9 months began to recede, replaced by overwhelming joy and gratitude. Cole sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Margaret's shoulders, gazing at Samuel with an expression of pure wonder. Thank you, he said softly to Margaret. Thank you for letting me be part of this, for letting me be his father. You are his father in every way that matters, Margaret said. You loved him before he was even born. You held me through every moment of fear. This is our son, Cole. They stayed at Doc Williams' office for the rest of the day, while Margaret rested and Samuel nursed and slept. Mrs. Henderson arrived mid-morning, having been sent word by Doc Williams, and she cried happy tears as she held her grandson. He is beautiful, she said, rocking Samuel gently. Absolutely beautiful. And you did so well, Margaret. I am so proud of you. By evening, Doc Williams declared them both healthy enough to go home. Cole drove the wagon slowly and carefully, as though carrying precious cargo, which he was. Margaret sat beside him with Samuel bundled in her arms, and she could not stop looking at her son's face. Every few minutes, she would check to make sure he was still breathing, still pink and healthy. And each time her heart would swell with relief and love. Life at the ranch settled into a new rhythm centered around Samuel. Margaret found that motherhood, while exhausting, was also deeply fulfilling in ways she had not anticipated. Samuel was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in 3-hour stretches, which was more than Margaret had hoped for. Cole was besotted with the baby, holding him whenever Margaret needed a break, changing diapers without complaint, and walking the floor at night when Samuel was fussy. You are a natural father, Margaret told him one evening as she watched him rock Samuel to sleep. I love him, Cole said simply, gazing down at the baby in his arms. How could I not? Look at him, Margaret. He is perfect. The first few weeks passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. Margaret was so focused on caring for Samuel that she barely had time to worry, though occasionally the fear would creep back in. She would wake in the middle of the night and panic if she could not immediately hear Samuel breathing in his cradle. She would check on him constantly during the day, making sure he was not too hot or too cold, that he was eating enough, that he was thriving. It is normal to worry, Mrs. Henderson assured her during one of her frequent visits. Every mother worries about her children, but you cannot let the worry consume you, dear. Samuel is healthy and strong. You need to trust that. Gradually, as the weeks turned into months and Samuel continued to thrive, Margaret felt the fear begin to truly loosen its grip. Samuel was growing beautifully, gaining weight and meeting every milestone. He smiled at 6 weeks, laughed at 3 months, and rolled over at 4 months. Each achievement felt like a small miracle to Margaret, proof that her son was healthy and developing perfectly. Cole legally adopted Samuel when the baby was 3 months old, making it official that he was Samuel's father in the eyes of the law. It was a simple proceeding at the county courthouse, but it meant everything to both Margaret and Cole. Samuel would carry the Henderson name and would never have to question who his father was. "You are my son," Cole told Samuel as they left the courthouse, the baby nestled in his arms. "In every way that matters, you are mine, and I will love you and protect you for the rest of my life." Margaret watched them together and felt her heart overflow with love. She had never imagined, in those dark days after James died, that she could be this happy again. Cole had given her back her life, had shown her that it was possible to love again after loss, to hope again after grief. When Samuel was 6 months old, Margaret realized she was pregnant again. The discovery brought a complex mix of emotions: joy, fear, excitement, and anxiety, all tangled together. She told Cole one evening after they had put Samuel to bed, her hands trembling as she spoke the words, "I am with child again. About 2 months along, I think." Cole's face lit up with joy, but then concern replaced it when he saw her expression. "How are you feeling about it?" "Terrified," Margaret admitted. "I know I carried Samuel safely and he is healthy and perfect, but I cannot help but remember Emma. What if something goes wrong this time?" "Then we will face it together, just like we faced everything with Samuel," Cole said, pulling her into his arms. "But Margaret, you proved with Samuel that your body can carry a baby to term. You are strong and healthy. There is no reason to think this pregnancy will be any different." "I wish I could believe that," Margaret said, "but the fear is already there, whispering in my ear." "Then I will hold you through every moment of fear, just like I did before," Cole promised. "You do not have to be brave alone, Margaret. I am here, and I am not going anywhere." This pregnancy was different from the start, partly because Margaret had an active 6-month-old to care for and did not have time to dwell on her fears quite as much. Samuel kept her busy and distracted, and his joyful presence was a constant reminder that good things could happen, that babies could be born healthy and grow strong. Still, there were difficult moments. When Margaret reached 26 weeks, the point at which Emma had been born too early, she had a panic attack so severe that Cole had to take her to Doc Williams to be reassured that everything was fine. At 34 weeks, when she had thought her water had broken with Samuel, she was hypervigilant for any sign of early labor. Each milestone brought its own anxiety, but Cole was there through all of it, holding her, reassuring her, reminding her to breathe. "I am scared I will lose this baby too," Margaret told him one night when she was 36 weeks along and unable to sleep. Her body was shaking with the force of her anxiety, and she felt like she could not catch her breath. Cole wrapped his arms around her, careful of her swollen belly, and held her until the shaking subsided. "You are not going to lose this baby," he said with quiet certainty. "This little one is going to be just fine, just like Samuel. You have carried this baby for 9 months, Margaret. Your body knows what to do." "What if something goes wrong during the birth?" Margaret asked. "What if the cord gets wrapped or the baby gets stuck or—" "Then Doc Williams will handle it," Cole interrupted gently. "He has delivered hundreds of babies, Margaret. He knows what he is doing, and I will be right there beside you, holding your hand, just like I was with Samuel." Margaret leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I do not know what I would do without you." "You will never have to find out," Cole promised. "I am yours, Margaret, for as long as we both shall live. You and Samuel and this new baby. You are my family, and I will protect you with everything I have." Margaret went into labor 3 days before her due date, and this time she recognized the signs immediately. She felt the first contraction while making breakfast, a familiar tightening across her belly that made her pause and take a deep breath. "Cole," she called out to where he was feeding Samuel in his high chair. "I think today is the day." Cole's eyes widened, but he managed to stay calm. "How far apart are the contractions?" "That was the first one," Margaret said. "But I am certain this is real labor, not false contractions. It feels exactly like it did with Samuel. They made arrangements quickly, taking Samuel to Mrs. Henderson's house in town, then going straight to Doc Williams' office. The labor progressed more quickly than it had with Samuel, and within 6 hours Margaret was pushing their second child into the world. "It is a girl," Doc Williams announced, and Margaret heard her daughter's cry fill the room. "A beautiful baby girl," Margaret cried as Doc Williams placed her daughter on her chest. The baby had a cap of auburn hair, the same color Margaret's had been as a child, and when she opened her eyes, they were a striking gray blue that reminded Margaret of Cole's eyes. "Emma Rose," Margaret whispered, touching her daughter's cheek. "Our Emma Rose." Cole was crying openly, his hand gently stroking the baby's head. "She is perfect, absolutely perfect." This time, Margaret did not spend the hours after birth consumed with fear. She knew her daughter was healthy, knew that she had successfully delivered another baby. The ghosts of the past were finally truly laid to rest. She had not forgotten her first Emma, the daughter she had lost, but she had made peace with that grief. This Emma was her own person, a new life full of possibility, and Margaret could love her without the shadow of fear hanging over everything. They brought Emma home to the ranch 2 days later, where Samuel was waiting with his grandmother. At 13 months old, Samuel was curious about the new baby, reaching out with gentle hands to touch her tiny fingers. Margaret watched her son meet his sister and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. "We have been blessed," she told Cole that night as they sat together on the porch, Emma sleeping in her arms and Samuel already in bed. "I did not think I could be this happy, not after everything we lost, but look at us now." "You fought for this happiness," Cole said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "You faced your fears and kept going even when you wanted to give up. You earned this, Margaret." "We earned it," Margaret corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you. You saved me, Cole Henderson. You gave me back my life and gave me a family I never thought I would have again." "You saved me too," Cole said softly. "I was just going through the motions before I met you, working the ranch and helping my mother and not really living. You gave me purpose, gave me love, gave me a family. We saved each other." They sat together in the gathering twilight, watching the stars come out one by one over the desert. The air was warm and still, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. Inside the house, their son slept peacefully in his crib. In Margaret's arms, their daughter made soft, snuffling sounds as she dreamed. And beside Margaret, solid and steady, was the man who had held her through every moment of fear and shown her that love could heal even the deepest wounds. The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into an energetic little boy who loved helping his father with the horses and following him around the ranch. Emma was a happy, sunny child who charmed everyone she met. When Samuel was 4 and Emma was 3, Margaret gave birth to a second son, whom they named William Cole Henderson. This time, there was no fear, no panic, only joy and anticipation. Margaret had finally learned to trust in the goodness of life, to believe that she deserved happiness. Cole expanded the ranch over the years, buying more land and increasing his cattle herd. Margaret turned their home into a place of warmth and welcome, raising their children with love and care, teaching them to be kind and strong and brave. Mrs. Henderson remained an active presence in their lives, a beloved grandmother who spoiled the children shamelessly and helped Margaret whenever she needed it. Margaret never forgot her first Emma or her first husband, James. She kept their memories alive by telling her children stories about them, by visiting James's grave when they traveled back to New Mexico to see family, by wearing the locket Cole had given her that contained both their pictures. But the grief no longer consumed her. It had become a part of her story, a chapter in the book of her life, but not the whole story. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Margaret on a picnic to the cottonwood trees where he had first told her he loved her. The children were spending the day with Mrs. Henderson, and it was just the two of them, like it had been in those early days. "Do you remember this spot?" Cole asked as they spread out a blanket in the shade. "Of course I remember," Margaret said. "This is where I first told you I was pregnant with Samuel. This is where I told you about Emma and about how scared I was. This is where you promised to help me through every moment of fear." "And I kept that promise," Cole said, pulling her close. "I held you through every fear, every doubt, every moment of panic, and look at us now. 3 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, a good life. We made it, Margaret." We did, Margaret agreed, kissing him. We faced the fear together, and we came out the other side stronger than ever. I love you, Cole said. I loved you then, and I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath. I love you too, Margaret said. Thank you for being patient with me, for understanding my fear, for never giving up on me even when I was at my lowest. Thank you for being the father my children needed and the husband I did not know I was searching for. They sat together watching the desert landscape shimmer in the afternoon heat, hands intertwined, hearts full. Margaret thought about the journey that had brought them here, all the pain and fear and grief she had survived, all the joy and love and hope she had found. Life was not always easy, and there would be more challenges ahead, but she knew with absolute certainty that she could face anything with Cole beside her. Do you think about having more children? Cole asked, breaking into her thoughts. Margaret laughed. 3 is quite enough for now, thank you. Though I suppose if we were blessed with another, I would welcome them with joy instead of fear. That is all I could ask, Cole said, pressing a kiss to her temple. That is all any of us can ask, really. To face life with joy instead of fear, to hope instead of despair, to love instead of hiding from love. You taught me that, Margaret said. You showed me that it was possible to love again after loss, to hope again after grief, to believe that good things could still happen even after terrible things had happened. We taught each other, Cole said. That is what love is, Margaret. 2 people holding each other up, sharing the weight of fear and grief and joy and hope. We are a team, you and we always will be. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, Cole and Margaret packed up their picnic and headed home to their children. The ranch house came into view as they crested the last hill, smoke rising from the chimney, lamplight glowing in the windows. It looked warm and welcoming, a symbol of everything they had built together. Inside, Mrs. Henderson had returned with the children, and Samuel, Emma, and William came running to greet them, chattering excitedly about their day with grandmother. Margaret gathered them close, breathing in the sweet scent of their hair, feeling their small bodies pressed against hers. This was her family, her home, her future. This was the life she had fought for, the happiness she had earned through every moment of fear and doubt. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Margaret stood at the window of the bedroom she shared with Cole, looking out at the star-filled sky. She felt Cole's arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Margaret said. "For you, for our children, for this life we have built. I am thinking about how far we have come from that day when you found me nearly fainting in the street, how much we have survived and overcome together." "We have been through a lot," Cole agreed. "But we made it through because we faced it together. That is the secret, I think. Not avoiding fear or pretending it does not exist, but walking through it hand in hand with someone you love." "I am not afraid anymore," Margaret realized, saying the words aloud for the first time. "For so long, fear was my constant companion, but somewhere along the way, I let it go. I still worry sometimes, the way any mother worries about her children, but it is not that consuming terror anymore. It is just normal concern, manageable and reasonable." "You conquered your fear," Cole said. "That is one of the bravest things I have ever witnessed. Margaret, watching you fight through that terror day after day, watching you choose hope even when you were terrified, watching you become the amazing mother you are today. You inspire me every single day." Margaret turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his cheek. "I could not have done it without you. You were my rock, my anchor, my safe harbor. You held me through every storm and never let go. I owe you everything, Cole Henderson." "You do not owe me anything," Cole said firmly. "Loving you is not a debt to be repaid, Margaret. It is a joy and a privilege. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to build something lasting and meaningful. If anything, we are even." They stood together in the moonlight, streaming through the window, holding each other close. 2 people who had found each other in the midst of grief and fear and had built something beautiful together. Outside, the desert night was alive with sound, crickets chirping, a coyote howling in the distance, the gentle rustle of wind through the cottonwood trees. Inside, their children slept peacefully, secure in the love and safety their parents had created for them. Margaret thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Salvation Creek, broken, grieving, terrified of the future. She thought about the journey she had traveled, from despair to hope, from fear to love, from loss to finding a new family. It had not been easy, and there had been moments when she thought she could not go on, but she had persevered. She had faced her demons and come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more capable of love than she had ever imagined possible. "I am scared I will lose this baby too," she had once told Cole, shaking with fear. And Cole had held her through every moment of that fear, had stood beside her through every challenge, had loved her and her children with a devotion that never wavered. He had shown her that love was not about being fearless, but about facing your fears with someone by your side. Now, 10 years later, with 3 healthy children sleeping down the hall and a husband who loved her more with each passing year, Margaret could finally say with complete honesty that she was not afraid anymore. She had learned that life was full of uncertainty, that there were no guarantees, but she had also learned that love was worth the risk. Her children were worth the fear she had faced to bring them into the world. Cole was worth the vulnerability of opening her heart again after loss. "What are you thinking about now?" Cole asked, noticing the smile on her face. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Margaret said, "and about how proud I am of us, of everything we have built and overcome together. I am thinking about our children and how blessed they are to have you as their father. I am thinking about how much I love you and how grateful I am that you found me that day in the street and refused to let me face my fears alone." "I am the lucky one," Cole insisted. "You gave me a family, Margaret. You gave me Samuel and Emma and William. You gave me a home full of love and laughter. You gave me a purpose beyond just existing day to day. I was sleepwalking through life before I met you, and you woke me up. Then we woke each other up," Margaret said, stretching up to kiss him. "And we built this beautiful life together, brick by brick, day by day, moment by moment." They went to bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms, 2 people who had found each other in the wilderness and created an oasis of love and safety. And in the morning, they would wake up to their children's laughter, to breakfast around the kitchen table, to another day of the ordinary, extraordinary life they had built together. Margaret's story did not end there, of course. Life continued, with all its joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. Samuel grew into a fine young man who took over the ranch when Cole's hands grew too stiff with arthritis to do the heavy work anymore. Emma became a teacher in Salvation Creek, beloved by her students for her patience and kindness. William followed in his father's footsteps as a horse trainer, developing a reputation throughout the territory for his skill and gentleness with difficult animals. Cole and Margaret grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering like the landscape around them. They became pillars of the Salvation Creek community, known for their generosity and their enduring love for each other. When people asked Margaret about the secret to their long and happy marriage, she always said the same thing. "We faced our fears together. We held each other through the storms. We chose love, every single day, even when it would have been easier to give up." And when Margaret finally passed away at the age of 72, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, with Cole holding her hand just as he had held it through every important moment of her life, her last words were a testament to the journey they had traveled together. "I am not afraid," she whispered, squeezing Cole's hand weakly. "I am not afraid because I know that love never ends. It transforms, it transcends, it continues beyond this life. You showed me that, Cole. You taught me that love is stronger than fear, stronger than grief, stronger than death itself." Cole kissed her forehead, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "I love you, Margaret Henderson. I loved you from the moment I saw you in that street, and I will love you beyond this life and into whatever comes next." "And I love you," Margaret said, her voice barely audible now. "Thank you for holding me through every moment of fear. Thank you for showing me that I could love again, could hope again, could build a life worth living. Thank you for our children and our grandchildren and all the years we had together. Thank you for everything." She closed her eyes then, a peaceful smile on her face, and slipped away, surrounded by love. And though Cole grieved her loss deeply, he did not despair, because Margaret had taught him the same lesson he had once taught her, that love continues, that memories sustain us, that the people we love remain with us even after they are gone. Cole lived another 5 years after Margaret passed, spending his days surrounded by his children and grandchildren, sharing stories of their mother and grandmother, keeping her memory alive through his words and his love. And when he finally joined her, His last thought was of Margaret's face on their wedding day, young and beautiful and full of hope, the fear finally gone from her eyes. Their story became a legend in Salvation Creek, passed down through generations as an example of true love. The pregnant widow and the cowboy who held her through every moment of fear, who built a life together from the ashes of grief, who proved that love could heal the deepest wounds and that facing your fears with someone beside you made all the difference. Their descendants continued to ranch the land Cole had built up, and the Henderson name became synonymous with integrity, kindness, and enduring devotion. And every year on the anniversary of Margaret and Cole's wedding, the family would gather at the cottonwood trees where it had all begun, where Margaret had first confessed her fear and Cole had promised to hold her through it. They would share a meal together, tell stories of Margaret and Cole, and remind each other of the lesson those two remarkable people had taught, that love is worth the risk, that family is worth fighting for, and that facing your fears with courage and companionship can transform your entire life. The love story of Margaret and Cole Henderson lived on, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the miraculous healing that can happen when one person refuses to let another face their darkest moments alone. It was a story of fear conquered, of love found in unexpected places, of families built from hope and determination. It was a story of the Wild West, where life was hard and uncertain, but where true love could still flourish against all odds. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that resonated through the generations. When someone is afraid, when they are facing their deepest fears and most painful memories, the greatest gift you can give them is your steady presence, your unwavering support, your promise to hold them through every moment until they are strong enough to stand on their own again. That was what Cole had given Margaret, and what Margaret had given Cole in return. That was the legacy they left behind, more valuable than land or money or possessions. The legacy of love that holds firm through every storm, love that transforms fear into hope, love that creates families and futures from the ruins of the past. Their story ended, as all stories must, but their love continued in the hearts and lives of all those they had touched. And in the little cemetery on the hill overlooking Salvation Creek, 2 headstones stood side by side, bearing the names Margaret Henderson and Cole Henderson, beloved wife and husband, devoted parents and grandparents, and beneath those names, a simple epitaph that captured the essence of their remarkable journey together. They faced fear with love, and love conquered all.